Why run when you can walk like a Goliath, like a Goliath, like a Goliath.
Welcome to the WFR Records podcast. With special guest, Autumna.
Walk like a Goliath, like a Goliath, like a Goliath, like a Goliath, like a Goliath.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 4 of the WFR Records podcast. My name is Fraser. Today's guest is Autumna, who is Emile Wauters. He has a couple of really exciting releases that are coming out within the next kind of few weeks. Hi Emile, how's it going? You alright?
I'm fine, can't complain. How are you, Fraser?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. Emile is probably one of the nicest, most humblest guys we've had the pleasure of kind of working with at WFR. It's been a joy to kind of work with them and basically work together on a unique release, I suppose, for the label. For anybody who tracked the Bandcamp Friday in March, we have a 2 CD retrospective box set called mmx-mmxx, which, as the name implies, it's basically a 10-year retrospective of some of Autumna's best output from the last 10 years that he self-released on his own Bandcamp page. And I remember right at the beginning of our relationship, which was probably last autumn, if I remember rightly, it was around about August, September last year that you kind of sent an email. Do you remember that?
I think that was actually somewhere mid-December, start of December, mid-December. I sent you an email inquiring.
All the days are melting into one, so it probably was December. And for backstory, and obviously we're going to get into a lot of kind of Autumna's background and his history in music and where he gets his influences from. Talk about technology and stuff like that. We now have Ali, who takes care of all the submissions, right? So, so he didn't have that title at that point. I was still running about with my hair on fire, trying to do everything myself. I hadn't assembled, the team that we now have in place, on top of day job and on top of Donovan and everything else that's going on. Yeah. And you sent an email and it had a link to your Bandcamp, and I was equal parts amazed and horrified to find that there was about 350 tracks of yours already out across 55 releases, ranging from singles to EPs and albums. It's in the mid to high 50s anyway. And I was thinking, well, he's going to be coming to me with new material, right? That's what artists do.
Yeah, that was the idea, yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember thinking, well, I need to listen to some of this stuff. And then, so I scrolled all the way, you know what Bandcamp's like, everybody, and when someone's got a discography, you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to find their first releases. And I thought, right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. And I just remember starting at the very first release, all the way down from 2010, and worked upwards. And it was like, why does nobody know about this guy? And for a start, I thought you were a girl because I misread your name as Emily. So I actually thought I was speaking to a woman.
I get that often.
But that doesn't matter, right? I would have signed you anyway. And I just remember just scrolling and listening, and it's quite interesting because your early stuff's quite beat heavy, and as you scroll upwards, and I listened to every single track, and I just took notes of what ones I liked, and by the time you get to closer to the present day, I would have been with the Sam Tenjing EP, which I think was the last one in 2020. The dynamic had shifted from crunchy, lo-fi, monosynth, sample, vocal stuff, to just complete horizontalness and stillness and slow modulated ambient stuff. And I was just, we have to curate this. and do something really, really cool. So we'll talk about some of the individual tracks in your kind of process, but tell me a little bit about your kind of early life in music, because like me, you're no young pup, right?
Yeah.
You've got there's a few pelts on this horse, right? So have you been in Antwerp pretty much kind of all your life? Have you kind of moved from place to place within Belgium? Tell me a little bit about your kind of background.
I've stayed pretty much locally. I moved back to where I was living as a child, I think a good decade ago. I lived in the centre of Antwerp for almost a good decade as well. And in terms of growing up, I was exposed by a fair amount of music. On my father's side, there was very heavy on the jazz, Handel, piano concertos. My grandfather, the same. He was very into opera, classical music. Then I had my grandmother. She was into the French chansonniers, also Marlene Dietrich. So I had a very broad spectrum in terms of influence of musical stuff that I was exposed to. And also I really developed a taste for music at a very early age. I think I started buying CDs when I was 11, 12 years old. With the pocket money you got for Christmas, for your birthday. Very proud to buy a Michael Jackson or whatever it was back then. And that slowly started evolving. It only got bigger. I mean, I basically like everything. Well, not everything, but a lot of stuff. And meeting different people who are also into music actually sort of developed a taste for trying to do something myself. And then as it happens, I came into contact with a few guys who one of them, he was learning play bass guitar. Another guy, he was actually messing around with Fruity Loops. I think that's at least 25 years ago now.
Very early stuff.
Yeah. And really the first open source versions of DAWs that were available, stuff like Hammerhead. They also had ripped off copies of other stuff. We simply started experimenting. It was all very amateuristic. Nothing really came out of it, but that did give me a push in the direction of trying to find my own path in that area, wanting to make something tangible, trying to make something for myself, basically. That was really the first inclination that I had to try and do something with music, because I've got no background in terms of education. I mean, I cannot read notes. Some people sometimes call me tone deaf, which I don't think is entirely true, but
it's not entirely fair either, is it?
No, I've got a feeling, when I hear something that I've done and I like it, I'm not easily satisfied. Let's put it that way. But I've got no training in music or instrumentation or technology. So I really started digging into what's out there, what can I do, what fits me, what makes me feel comfortable. And then slowly that way I started progressing to where I'm now, basically.
For news about the latest releases from WFR Records, follow us on Bandcamp, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. with you, in love with you, in love with you, in love with you.
What was the music scene like kind of in Antwerp? Because it's a fairly big city. Was it fairly thriving kind of back then when you were just starting to get into, you know, I presume going to gigs and maybe even kind of performing with bands or, you know, with yourself as a unit? What's the kind of scene like there?
I think I was really fortunate in that way, that when I started buying vinyls, which must have been when I was about 18, 19, really buying vinyl like a little maniac. It was a very small shop in Antwerp, and the guy was involved in the local scene. It went from experimental guitar music to noise to electronica to quite a fair wide range. And he was also involved in the gig circuit. He also helped setting up tours for small, back then fairly small, humble labels, even reaching the States sometimes. There would be in-store performances. And that also really had a major influence on me. Seeing those people do stuff live, especially electronica, which eventually pushed me down that particular path. A guy in a shop playing on a small table. I remember a gig I once saw. It was Thomas Lane, and he did an in-store performance. He had a few modules, memory cards, and he played a set of about 45 minutes, nothing but screeches, and it was harsh noise. But after 10 minutes, the guy was sweating like you couldn't imagine. But I was
noise things on YouTube. There's a German band that always seem to pop up on my Facebook timeline, and it's just, and they're putting so much into it. It's just like, it can't actually be that hard because not a lot's happening. Do you know what I mean? It's like Metal Machine Music by Lou Reed, right?
Yeah.
It's like, there's only so much that's changing. Why is, you know, if you're going to be working that hard, surely you would be able to hear that in the music. But having a hub like that, you know, in the centre of town where, you know, you can get your vinyl fix. There's in stores as well, so you're getting influences from there, you know. And then if there's even an offshoot label or getting involved in the gig circuit, it's just the perfect kind of mesh of everything that you could kind of ever want.
Yeah, it's actually, you could call it compost, really.
Totally.
And the off chance was also that the two guys working there, well, the owner of the store and later on the weirdo we hired to tend the shop while he was at his other job to make extra money. They also both started a small DIY label. There once was talk about trying to do something, but it never really happened. It was also in the very, very early stages. So
it's quite.
I never really.
Yeah. To start something up from scratch. I mean, God.
Yeah.
We kind of lived that. You know, last kind of May, and it just takes a massive amount of time, and then you need to have people that really care about it to kind of help propel you to give you success. So I can completely say, especially when you're trying to do 4 or 5 different things at once, it must be really quite challenging, but it's also quite inspiring to see people like that, because from my point of view, I look at people that are multifunctioning, and there's a lot of us that are making music personally and running labels, and they're everywhere in our scene. You've got Matt Hanley doing it with Pulse Lovers, also running Woodford House, Steve Hadfield, who's also running Disintegration State, Darren Giddens, who's also running Colander, and there's just so many people that are just doing, there's more than one string to the bow, and that's why these guys do well, because they are at the heart of something, and it's a thrill to kind of be a part of it.
For me, the people you described, they're a bit of modern day Renaissance men. I mean, the same goes for you, Fraser, because you're also juggling still a daytime job. You're juggling the label. You're also in a band. You do mastering. I mean, you run a studio. But you're also a Renaissance man when it comes to that. To me, I mean, you're at home in a lot of fronts, and you got it, and you're doing well. And all those other people you mentioned, the same goes for them.
You're listening to the Where Foxmer Records podcast, featuring special guest, Autumna.
So let's talk about the Autumna project. So it's been going for well over a decade. Describe to me the change in process from the really early stuff to the more current, up-to-date stuff.
I think what really got me started in making something was doing spoken word stand-up with a couple of mates of mine, laying soundscapes beneath, and then shortly after doing one or two of those things in dodgy bars and whatnot, I started to try to make stuff like that myself.
Right.
Simply record poetry, texts, whatever, and then try to put music under it that I made myself or tried to make myself. In the beginning, I was really focused on trying to make it catchy in terms of, put some percussion in there, put a beat, put a bass line, some nice synthy flows. But after a while, I got kind of stuck. I felt like I was not going anywhere. Constantly doing the same thing, limiting myself. I spent hours and hours trying to make an original percussion or a beat from cuts and clicks, trying to assemble something. But after a while, you end up with a pile of tracks that, to me, all sounded the same.
Yeah.
So
that's the danger. It's danger for them. Some people are quite happy to repeat a formula.
Yeah. Once you get into a certain zone and a certain place where you feel comfortable, that's what like you say. There's the danger of. We're all creatures of habit.
Start to worry. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
You're totally right. Because it's quite interesting. Because the earlier stuff. I mean, I'm just looking at the track listing right now. I've got the cheat sheet. I could probably tell the track listing off by heart. But when you hear tracks from the earlier Autumna period, the one that jumps out straight away is Venetian Blinds, which is, and Venetian Blinds is kind of that. I think that's a quintessential early period Autumna track. It's a little bit how An Eagle in Your Mind is the quintessential Board to Canada track, you know, because it encapsulates everything. It's got some brilliant spoken word through it, some really nice crispy overdriven beats, you know, brilliant synth lines, and it just has this, it's hard to describe, it's like a mystique. It feels like it was recorded ages ago, which is again just kind of part of the general Autumna aesthetic anyway, but there's so many tracks that are like that. You don't overdo it. That's the beauty of it. I mean, I was speaking not that long ago about Ray Nakatani's album.
Yeah.
Now he takes a completely different approach to you, but he also doesn't overdo it. You know, his stuff is, you know, it's really clinical and it's everything in its right place, and it's just it's phenomenal. But it never feels.
But it works.
Your stuff doesn't. It's exactly the same, but it's made completely differently. Your stuff doesn't feel cluttered either, but it's never boring. There's loads of texture to it, and that's just talking about the tracks with the beats in. I mean, it gets really, really interesting when you start talking about the tracks that are like hybrids. You know, that have slight percussion going through them. You know, tracks like Sanitas and September and Iroyu, the ones that almost have a beat, they kind of almost get there, but they're curious enough to kind of make you stop and go, I'm not sure I've heard stuff like this before. The cool thing about the compilation album is being able to curate a journey for the listener.
It's in there, yeah.
It could have been really, really easy to just do it in chronological order. But then the second CD would have had no beats in it at all, and that's what I'd figured out. I'm like, right, that has merit. I mean, you could do like a CD with the beats on, and then the second CD would be completely elongated. I thought, well, that's not really. I don't think that makes for as interesting a listen when you put them all together.
Yeah.
Because naturally, when you did all the tracks, when you see them on MMX, they have no relationship to each other because they all individually belong. To kind of a different set of tracks with each release.
Yeah.
You go from Venetian Blinds and it's all quite techno-y. It's as techno as you get, and then you go into
Low-key techno.
Yeah. And then you go into the next couple of tracks, which is Her Face and Like Love Asking Directions Home, and it's another world entirely. So you've got to describe for me. And, I love everybody that's listening, but this isn't for the listeners. Describe to me personally your method of working with your ambient tracks.
You mean the process?
Yeah, I want to know the process because I can't do your process.
What it basically comes down to is, in my mind, I always, when people ask me, what exactly is it that you do? I always say, well, I make digital tape loops. That's what it basically comes down to. I can build a 4 or 5 minute track with a 4 second sample. That's what I do. I take a sound that I like, that catches my ear. I sample it from somewhere, or I'm just messing around on the computer and something pops up. Like, oh yeah, this might work. There's a lot of delaying and stretching involved, pitching down, then load it into, I mainly use Reason, load it into Reason, sample it, start messing about with keys, trying to find a certain note, certain line that I like, then add effects up the wazoo. There's a shitload of reverb in there, delays, echoes. I do takes of 10-15 minutes, export those, then I take sections that I like, and then I start over.
Yeah.
So basically,
it's like a resampling of yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes before I'm actually happy with something that I'm going to use, it takes me, I don't know, 10-15 takes like that. Just make actually a bass track, a stem, whatever, and then sample that, and then work on from there until, for me, it has a cohesive feeling and it breathes something that I like.
You're listening to the Where Foxmer Records podcast.
you've nailed it when you say feeling, because it's quite. I mean, I remember putting a tweet up. I think a week before we were doing the pre-orders for the album, and I don't like listening to individual tracks. I like listening to a whole body of work. So if I'm maybe going for a morning walk and I'm going to, have something for an hour, I'm not firing a playlist on. I want to hear an album from start to finish. Yeah. And there's about 80 minutes worth of music on mmx. There's 22 tracks on there, and I remember listening to it. I can't remember whether it was in the car or in a walk. I can't remember what I was doing, but it did feel like I was having an experience, like an emotional experience, because the sounds that you get, they pull on a memory that you might not even have, or it makes you reminisce about someone that you maybe haven't seen in a while, or maybe someone who's passed away. There's a real sense of longing in the music. When you listen to tracks like Staring Back, we made a video and put it on the Where Fox on YouTube, and it's literally 4 minutes of clouds, right? That's what it feels like. And we've also done other kind of little promos and stuff like that, but you kind of close your eyes and listen to a lot of the stuff. It's and this is why I'm touching on the ambient stuff, because that's the stuff that can sometimes really get into your soul, and you hear tracks like, I mean, one of my favourites early on was Rafferty Sings the Blues. Yeah. Now that's just a chord sequence looped slowly. And I just remember saying, I was like, I can't wait for that chord to come back round, and I know it's coming, and I do not care, because it just feels, it almost feels gratifying when it gets there. When a chord pattern resolves, and you're like, yes, do you know what I mean? It's phenomenal. And there's so many tracks like that. California Droning's like that. Soul Dirt is like that. I'm trying to think here. Birthright. And then you have other tracks that have an even more added layer of emotion, because you add, whether it is your own spoken word with aluminium or aluminum, as you call it. Yeah. And then other tracks like Turns Again Home. Yeah. And there's just a weight to it. It just feels like lead. So when you get to the end, and I think Turns Again Home was a good shout by myself as an album ender, because it feels like there's a resolve to the whole thing. So when you write that ambient stuff, is that by design, that you're putting weight and emotion into it, rather than just finding a loop and sticking a 20-second Valhalla supermassive reverb on it?
I keep going until I've got something that pleases me. I mean, it's easy to simply, I use loops. I loop stuff all the time. But for me, there has to be, of course, I listen differently to it than other people will. Because I was there when it was being made, and when I'm making it, I know where I more or less want to go. But sometimes I end up in a completely different place, and something comes out that I wasn't even expecting myself. And like you say, also trying to maintain the principle of less is more. Because every time I'm near something that I'm happy with, I still have the inclination of, maybe I should do a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that. And then you do another export and you save it, you save another project file. And then in the end, I go back 3-4 project files and say, no, this is the one. Stop fucking about. It's been enough.
You're absolutely right. It's an art in itself to know when to stop. Right? I mean, it's like that with painting. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You know when you're done.
But that's something they're saying. One brushstroke can ruin a whole painting.
One more layer of dusty lo-fi drum loops could ruin a track as well. Absolutely right. So what we're hoping for in the listening experience is, I likened it personally to listening to, not musically, just how I felt after listening to it all, was like listening to something like Unknown Pleasures or OK Computer, where you almost feel drained but satisfied that you've been on an emotional journey. You're talking 10 years worth of stuff, you know, and that is 22 tracks out of, I mean, when you look at it, that's less than 10% of the tracks you put out, you know, on the Autumna name. So if people can, if there's one wish I have, it's that they get how I feel when I listen to it. And the reason why it's on 2 CDs is because I felt that you need a pause halfway through it. I mean, I could have done some crafty fade outs and maybe squeezed it all onto one 80-minute CD, but it's not 1997. No one's writing 78-minute albums anymore, right? You know, it's 2021. We're all trying to write, you know, albums that fit on vinyl now, just in case we can get them pressed. So that's why I kind of split up, because I felt like I need a break from this, but not because of it's, oh God, I can't handle it anymore, but it was just it can get quite overwhelming. So it's good that you've got the kind of almost like the fun techno tracks kind of interspersed with it, just to kind of almost lighten it, you know, to a degree. And it's maybe my most listened to of anything that's came out in Where a Fox.
That's a big compliment. Thank you.
If I've got an hour that, you know, I need something doing, you know, I turn to MMX, and that's what I'm hoping for other people, because there's loads of people doing interesting ambient stuff. I mean, we've got some interesting ambient stuff coming out in WFR in the next kind of 6 months, which is going to be great, but that's a different flavour. And everybody has their own individual flavour. So if anybody wants to check out the album we're talking about, it's called mmx-mmxx. All of the special wooden boxes are all sold out. They sold out within, I can't remember how many hours, 4 hours on Bandcamp.
3.5, 4 hours.
3.5 hours. I mean, who was? I wasn't keeping time. It just kind of happened, and it took us all a bit by surprise. Completely and utterly justified. We have 7 tracks up for, previewing at that point. You can obviously, by the time this show goes out now, you'll be able to listen to it all. There is a twin CD pack that is also going to still be available, but that's not that we're not just a one and done with you. We've also got plans for a couple of other things in the pipeline as well. In a couple of months' time, you will hopefully be able to get your hands on a companion EP, which is coming out on 10-inch lathe cut. So we've grabbed a couple of what I consider the best tracks from MMX, and also put a couple of extra tracks that are not on the twin CD. So that will be hopefully coming out in early summer. And on top of that, we've got a brand new studio album, which is already in the can. We already have it, and it's called Secret Radio. I think we can give that away. Tell me a little bit about, I mean, was the process the same for Secret Radio? I know there's a little bit of a story behind it. Tell me a little bit about what people can expect on this.
Actually, the basic concept of where I wanted to go was not necessarily carry on with the stuff that I have been doing for the past 4 or 5 years. We had also been into contact prior to that, and discussed some of the tracks, also the selections you made in terms of the beats using percussion, and for some reason I felt the need to actually try to pursue that alley again. So I initially set off making the typical autumna ambient stuff, and then I had time off. So my wife, she was still working that first week. We were planning on taking a holiday, but she couldn't, so I had 1 week more. And I think I spent the whole week behind the laptop just tinkering. And then one moment I thought, what if I chuck a beat onto this? And
the track you sent through just made my heart sing. I mean, there was almost a point I was like, you know what, we could put Secret Radio out as is, and then just get like 50 of these tracks with the beats, we'll just get some of them cut. So I think, given everything that's going to be going on, we don't want to saturate the market with your stuff and have it all come out at the same time. So we want to try and
I've done that myself the last 10 years.
I didn't want to bring that up, but yeah, I'm glad you did, and I didn't have to. So that's probably going to be, towards the end of the year. It'll definitely be 2021. and in true WFR style, we'll make a nice pretty offering for our
I
loyal
expect nothing less.
customers. Exactly, we've kind of set a precedent now. We can't go backwards. My wife Hazel tells me all the time, "Was like, well, we've kind of set a level now. You kind of have to kind of keep it." So
The level of quality, yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
For news about the latest releases from Wera Foxmer Records, follow us on Bandcamp, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
You touched a little bit on about the technology kind of side of it. So Reason's your go-to.
Yeah.
Are you completely in the box, or do you have hardware that complements the software?
Currently, I'm strictly using Reason. I've got an antiquated version, Reason 5, which probably came out, I think, what was it, 2013. Before I was using 4 for quite a long time. On the site, I use basic audio editing programs like WavePad and Audacity to splice, cut, and delay, and then load them into Reason. For Christmas, my wife got me a Micro Machine MK3. I'm trying to get the hang of, also trying to get some more gear going. But besides that, actually, it's all digital. Yeah, I used to use also a fairly antiquated MIDI keyboard that I inherited from my brother-in-law, but that more or less died. So it's all computer, it's all Reason actually. So at the moment,
are you creating that without a keyboard?
Yeah.
Dude, how you even? Oh my god, how's that even possible?
I use the laptop keyboard with a lot of patience.
Only Dead Mouse does that. Go on to Thoman.com and buy yourself like a €70 key with the proceeds of take some of the proceeds from selling the box and buy a that's an order. I don't know how, oh my god, how are you're playing notes on the you only do that if your keyboard is like completely died, or you don't have it and you've got your laptop on a train and you're making beats. And then you do the whole Command K, and then you get the keyboard up on the. Oh my god, Emile, how do you do that? Reason's hard enough.
With a lot of patience.
The Reason's like the trickiest of all the DAWs, I think, personally speaking. I mean, people that are into it are really, really, really into it. I mean, you have, a guy called Gerald now swears by it. Ad Rock still uses Reason. For kind of post Beastie Boys remixes and stuff like that. I just found it really fiddly, and just the learning curve of it. I suppose that there's a persistence thing of just kind of keeping going with it, but I just found it really, really tricky. But that's an absolute revelation that it's all in the box for you.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're just running it through Outboard, and you've managed to find like a 30-year-old Alesis like MIDI verb, off of like, eBay for €20 or whatever, and you're just firing stuff through that, and that's what was. I mean, it's so hard to impart texture when you're purely doing it digitally.
Digitally, yeah.
You blew my mind there. But get a bloody keyboard, and that's that's an order. Let's move on to stuff that you're kind of currently listening to in terms of, who your inspirations are, who you're kind of liking the sound of, kind of what stuff are you kind of listening to, when you take the kind of autumna headphones off?
These days, well, frankly, I'm very into these days too. We're a Foxma. Yeah, name dropping. Castles in Space as well, which I came across, I think, about the same time that I ran into WFR. Other labels that catch my ear and also follow fairly close is Touched Music.
Yeah, they've got some really good compilations out at the moment.
Yeah.
It's an embarrassment of riches there. You've nailed it with Castles in Space. You've nailed it with us.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. I can only speak for myself. I've found myself not buying as much commercial music, especially on vinyl.
Yeah.
And the last kind of 12 months has been a real eye-opener in terms of how much talent there is, not just within the UK, because electronic music's a worldwide thing, right? I mean, there's really no borders to it. But it feels like I would much rather support artists that I know on labels that I now trust, now that I'm aware of this scene. Because there's just so much good stuff out there. I mean, in terms of artists who you kind of liking at the moment, from within our scene.
On a whim, I bought the 59 Palin.
That's a cracking little EP.
That's an amazing album.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. I also have a thing for Cult 48, but that's probably because it's up there with the Boards of Canada genre. But that I stick on quite often. Also some recent stuff I acquired from the back catalogue of Castles in Space, Bernard Grancher.
Yes.
Also really like that guy. Some of his stuff is a bit quirky, but since I'm a bit quirky myself, that probably appeals to me, to my taste.
The most recent subscription library one falls into that category. It can be quite a challenge and listen, but it's super, super creative. And I think the album Soleil Eclatant, or however it was called, it came in.
I also have issues remembering the titles.
Black and white splatter vinyl. It was just absolutely gold. Well, I mean, Colin set the bar impossibly high, for any vinyl on the label. So, there's a bunch of good stuff, and it's good to see that you're embracing the kind of left of the dial stuff. There's so much more interesting stuff happening within our scene than Spandau Ballet putting out a 40-year compilation. I know exactly who I'd rather give my 25 quid to. Do you know what I mean? And it's
I'm the same.
But sometimes, I mean, this is what happens when you don't have gigs to go to, and
you have more time to look online. Yeah, but I think it's also like you say in those terms. I think it's also a form of escapism. I mean, you're literally confined to your own house. You kind of. They're even discouraging you to go to the local shop. I mean, for us, it's an adventure to go to the supermarket because that's about as far as you're allowed to go these days. So then you find other means to go places, and I think that music is really godsend when it comes to that.
So I will let you crack on. Any last words before I let you get on with your day?
It was a pleasure talking to you. Trip down memory lane. Some parts that were really in the nether regions of my mind, but which came up rather fluently, and also nice to reminisce a bit. All in all, a very nice experience, and great talking to you, Fraser.
You too, man. Take care.
To support Autumna, check out his back catalog at autumna.bandcamp.com.